The Marlins swept against the Dodgers. Close series in some ways, however, a sweep's a sweep. And Ryan Weathers looking good. Eddie Cabrera to the IL. Braxton Garrett and Jesus Luzardo due to return. All of a sudden, the Marlins rotation about to look very, very different. Brian De La Cruz on another heater and Jazz looking sexy in that leadoff spot. Tons going on here. This is Locked on Marlins.
You are Locked on Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins.
Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked on Marlins, your daily Marlins pod. I'm your host. Oh my days, he's 30 seconds in and already botched it. Nevertheless, I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. If you listen to the pod, of course, hit subscribe and leave a review. This is your team every day. And thanks for making Locked on Marlins your first listen. It's Thursday, the 9th of May. Don't forget, there's a YouTube channel. Hit subscribe over on the YouTube channel. That is also called Locked on Marlins. Hit subscribe there. Join the episodes there. And equally, join us in the comments. This episode is sponsored by our good friends over at Monopoly Go. And game off, we got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now, free on Google Play or App Store. Game on! An episode on, baby. There's a lot to cover. Firstly, an apology from me. There has been a few days without an episode. I was at a work event for 2 days, and so it meant that recording podcasts not really achievable. It was a few nights stay, including a day at the races. Think Kentucky Derby, but not quite as good as that. That's kind of the event that I was at, and it was fun. It was fun. No winners for me. There was no Marlins themed horses either. I was like, keep my eyes out for, potential, connections to the Marlins. And I think it's a sign. It's a sign. Unfortunately, there were no signs. So I went in a different direction. Still didn't win. Nevertheless, tons to get into. The Marlins have just completed their 3-game series against the Dodgers. And in some ways, it's probably an unsurprising result in that they were swept against the Dodgers. At the same time, particularly like game 3, it was close. And equally, there was a real flashpoint in game 2 where it was announced there was a no-hitter alert before the first pitch was thrown. And thus, Jazz Chisholm Jr. ended the no-hitter chance after the first pitch of the game. Glorious to see. We're going to talk about Jazz later on and lead off Jazz in particular. So let's start specifically with the pitching because there's about to be a lot of flex going on here. There's already been some flex. Let's start with the big news around Edward Cabrera. So Edward Cabrera pitching in Tuesday's game. It was a typical Edward Cabrera outing, I guess, in many ways. Gave up limited number of hits. I think the one hit he gave up was a salami. Unfortunately, the bases were juiced, linked to a walk, hit by pitch, another walk. Just standard Edward Cabrera getting himself into trouble. And unfortunately, against the Dodgers, particularly that top half of the order, there's a lot of danger there. And so if that happens, you leave yourself exposed. And the Dodgers lineup ended up fully exposing Eddie Cabrera. So, only getting through a couple of innings worth of work there for Eddie and exited the game. We then hear the news around, he's maybe dealing with something on his bicep, etc., which sounds discouraging. Then lands on the IL yesterday before the game. And the reason given was a shoulder impingement. So is it the bicep? Is it the shoulder? Is it both? Don't know. Nevertheless, throwing arm injury doesn't sound good. And so this is likely to be, potentially a longer stint maybe than what we've seen maybe with an AJ Park or whatever it might be, or even a Jesus Luzardo. So, yeah, Eddie Cabrera, to me, it feels like this is going to be a month at least, I would say, from this spot. He's had issues like this previously. This is his second IL stint this season. And man, oh man, when we reflect on like where we're at with Eddie Cabrera, I think unfortunately we're in this same cycle with Eddie. Nothing seems to be changing in two, primary areas really. Let's start with the numbers with Eddie. Right now, his ERA sits at just over 7, so it's 7.17 the ERA. That's just through 5 starts, by the way. 21 and 1/3 innings of work. Within those 21 and 1/3, there's been 14 walks. The whip sits currently at 1.594, which is a problem. It's too high. That's actually not as high as it was in 2021 from a whip perspective. But overall, you look at his career, 2021, 2023, and 2024, like the whips are unsustainable. They're in and around that 150 mark, which is too high, frankly. So the numbers, just haven't been good. The enticing thing is with Eddie is, 21 innings of work. There's 31 Ks in there. So this is just Eddie Cabrera now. We've pieced together enough body of work with him to work out where are we at. Because with Eddie Cabrera, we've been dreaming on Sandy Alcantara 2.0 for multiple years. Sandy made it to the big leagues. Eddie was working his way through. And the view was that, all of a sudden the Marlins are going to have another Sandy Alcantara. And I know it's unfair to maybe project that type of player, but that's probably half the problem here with Eddie, with Eddie specifically, where there were lofty expectations, and that comes right with being a top prospect in the system, etc. And equally, a guy that has the type of stuff that Eddie does. And when I think of Eddie, and I think of the time with Skip being the manager, it's been on loop for the year and a bit that Skip's been with the organization, where gotta attack the zone, gotta attack the zone, gotta attack the zone. And for whatever reason with Eddie Cabrera, there's either a mental issue, but it can't be mental at this point. It has to be some sort of technical issue with Eddie that holds him back. It has to be a mechanical, technical issue of some sorts that, or an anxiety thing or something. Something must go on where from one inning to the next, it's a completely different dude. But we see this continually. So you have to kind of ask yourself at this point, considering the number of years that Eddie has been in the Marlins organization, an organization that is renowned for pitching development. They have the best pitching coach in Mel Stottlemyre Jr. that has proven an ability to fix guys, so to speak. But you have to look at Eddie and think, of the Marlins taking him as far as they can? Like, is this as good as it can ever get for Eddie Cabrera at the big leagues? Take away all that we thought he could be. Let's just look at what he's delivered and what he's put on tape. You have to wonder, is this who Eddie Cabrera is? Are we just fantasizing at this point as Marlins fans? Or have we already moved on? And I think that's the interesting bit. It's like probably a lot of the fan base, like, they've seen this repeatedly. And so we've already, a lot of people maybe already checked out on Eddie. Not checked out, but, they know who he is. And maybe the expectations have been significantly lowered. And you're kind of just sitting there waiting for that spiraling car crash inning to occur. Because it seemingly always does. And you just don't know when. But it's going to be multiple walks in a row with limited numbers of outs. And next thing is there's a big inning. And Eddie can't get out of the inning. And next thing is the game's busted open, etc. If the Marlins were in a playoff series right now, let's just think about that. I mean, that again is another dream at this point, clearly for this year and probably for many years to come. But if the Marlins were in a playoff series at this point, what degree of trust could you ever place in Edward Cabrera in a game that mattered? Like, for me, considering he struggles to perform in games where it doesn't matter as highly anyway. Every game matters, but, Could you trust Eddie? I think the answer has to be no. And I think this is where it gets interesting, where you think about, okay, there's been a lot of trade talks around Edward Cabrera for many years. It's been at least two, maybe 3 seasons of conversations around trades linked to Eddie Cabrera. And you have to wonder, will the Marlins ever get the value back that maybe they were seeking? Could any other team acquire Eddie Cabrera and trust him? And frankly, at this point, should Eddie Cabrera even be a starting pitcher? Are we basically in AJ Puck territory? Where this is the funny thing, right? You see Puck out of the pen and he looks really effective at times. You then put him in the starter's role and these innings occur. It feels like the same is true for Eddie Cabrera. And we've never quite gotten to the position of seeing what he's like in the pen. But it feels like, considering the body of work we've had over 4 years at the big league level, not only is there health concerns, I'll talk about them in a sec, but when you look at what's being delivered, yes, it's dreamy upside, but he's nowhere reaching the upside. And it's similar to Puck, where on any given inning, it looks sexy as hell. But then the next inning, he walks 3 guys and completely loses it, and the game's lost. Considering the Marlins have made the decision to move Puck back to the pen, they've abandoned that experiment, if you want to call it that. I don't think it was an experiment, but they've abandoned that plan. You have to maybe consider at this point, are they going to abandon the plan with Eddie Cabrera in terms of seeing him as a starting pitcher? Clearly, his value, if they can get him to a point, is higher, potentially, as a starter. But as a 7 ERA starter at this point that has a whip in and around 1.5, that's a back-end guy. That's a guy you can't trust. And thus, a guy you're not going to give up a ton of prospect capital to go and acquire, even though the control is there. You have to look at it and think, well, if the Marlins can't fix him, who can? Or is he unfixable? Is this the peak? Is Eddie Cabrera at his peak as a starter right now? We're all dreaming on it, but I'm struggling with Eddie at this point to see what the future holds, frankly. And probably the future, if we're all honest with ourselves and we consider what the decision's just been made with AJ Puck, it feels to me like the natural decision would be, let's try him in the pen. Is there an elite reliever in there? And all of a sudden, you get him in the pen, and can he build value that way? And I get it. It feels nerve-wracking with a guy that has the profile he has to consider, could there be an elite reliever there? But maybe there is. And maybe we're at the point where the Marlins should entertain that situation. And I think it will boil down to, for Eddie, in this year anyway, how long is he out? Who else is healthy at that time? And I think you blend that together, and there could be a situation where, upon return, it could be, we're going to try him in the pen because it's unsustainable. He's untrustworthy in the rotation, which is disappointing. Let's talk about Brax and Jesus shortly, because they are imminent in terms of their return. So the Marlins lose Eddie Cabrera from the rotation, but we're about to get 2 of the main studs, the main workhorses that were expected to deliver for the Marlins in 24. They're expected back real soon this weekend against the Phillies. Before we do that, let's let you know, of course, about our good friends, firstly, over at DoorDash. And we'll get the graphics rolling. Guys, do you want to make mom smile? Start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with gifts from the brand she loves, delivered the very same day with DoorDash. Mums are a gift, so give her the best Mother's Day gift. Get gifts as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. Select from hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets to the best of tech, self-care essentials, and more, delivered right to her door. And also, you can pair flowers with a gift card so she can celebrate any way she wants. Is she a bookworm? Try a bookstore gift card. Does she love a good latte? Who doesn't? Get a gift card to her favorite coffee shop. You can't go wrong. So get all Mother's Day gifts all in one place to get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB. Order using DoorDash today. This episode is also brought to you by our good friends over at Monopoly Go. Absolutely love these guys. And game off. Game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already talked about that. But there's just so much good stuff in this game. Surely you've downloaded it by now. If you haven't, Monopoly Go can help you team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. It includes unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis to help you taunt friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go, it feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's also something fun to deliver. There's always something fun to discover at Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or App Store. Game on. All right, guys, back here with me, Peter Pratt, on Thursday, the 9th of May. Marlins swept in LA. Some interesting flashpoints from that series. I haven't really spoken about the series thus far. Hopefully, by the way, just want to call out. Hopefully, you guys are checking out the new postcast, the new Locked On Marlins postcast with Grease, who's hosting that one after every single game. It's feeding into the Locked On Marlins podcast audio feed. So if you're a podcast listener, you will see that every day, straight after the game. If you haven't checked it out yet, go and check it out. Equally, Grease is doing a great job there covering things right after the action. Also, what I'd say on those, Grease, his episode titles are right up there. They're elite. The title's elite. The content's elite. We've got you covered here on Lock the Marlins. So go and check it out. The Marlins postcast. Anyway, there's a couple of interesting flashpoints in this series, for sure. Like I mentioned, Jazz Chisholm Jr., I'm going to talk about him after the second ads and how he's embracing the leadoff spot, let's say, and impacting the team. The other interesting flashpoint, which I don't think really was a flashpoint, but became a flashpoint on Twitter, was Mickey Rowe getting a hit and chirping away seemingly to the Marlins bench and dugout. It looked like something that I don't think it was in the end, but it was pretty funny. Like, these games are happening like really late through the night, so I'm not watching live. So naturally, I'm catching up in the morning, seeing what's cooking, what's happening on Twitter, what's the flashpoints. And probably the biggest flashpoint in that game was, the Jazz leadoff bomb, and then Miggy Rose seemingly chirping to the bench. It looked like he was giving them a load of abuse, but seemingly that wasn't the case. There was a story behind it. There was some sort of friendly joke going on with Brian De La Cruz. But, Miguel Rojas and the Marlins, there forever be a connection. But what I wanted to say in this series, the thing that stood out to me yesterday in particular, Ryan Weathers. Ryan Weathers casually going along, like, he obviously gave up the home run, a wind-assisted home run, by the way, to Teoscar Hernandez, which ended up being the game-winning home run. But, man, oh, man, Ryan Weathers, he's just one of them guys, and I knew exactly what he would be, where he's becoming like a dependable back-end piece that plods along. I mean, he struck out Ohtani twice yesterday. It was impressive. It was a really impressive outing from Weathers. Really, really is. And he's just becoming a dependable arm. He maybe doesn't have the sexy upside of Eddie Cabrera. But Eddie Cabrera and his upside have got an over 7 ERA and an unsustainable whip. Ryan Weathers these are the types of guys that bring so much value to a club and a rotation. A guy that can go 5 and 6, three earned runs. Like, this is quality start territory. 6 innings, 3 earned runs or less. This is a quality start on the road in LA against, the top half of the order in particular is really dangerous, clearly, with the Dodgers. And Ohtani's playing out of his mind. Betts, Freeman, Muncy, Smith. I know Smith wasn't playing yesterday, but, it's Teoscar, obviously, yesterday. It's a dangerous lineup. So I just want to tip my cap to Ryan Weathers and the season that he's having. And again, kind of tip my cap to Kim Ang for identifying that opportunity. Tip my cap to Mel Stottlemyre. This is the funny thing. That combination of Kim Ang and Mel Stottlemyre in terms of acquiring guys via trades and, former top picks pitching and being able to make some adjustments and really take them to the next level. We've seen it with Jesus Luzardo. We're going to talk about him shortly. But also with Ryan Weathers, he's had a big step forward this year, which I don't think for anyone is really a true surprise. I think we probably expected it because that's what the Marlins do. That's what Mel Stottlemyre does. So tip my cap to Weathers. He's a workhorse. It's not super flashy in many ways, but he's a workhorse and he's effective and is a quality start in the road in LA. And I think we shouldn't forget that. It shouldn't go unacknowledged or unnoticed. That's the right word. That's the word I'm looking for. Talking about the rotation, Braxton Garrett is already back. He's already back on the roster anyway. He was the corresponding move for Eddie Cabrera. The rationale there, Brax had run out of rehab time. So he had to be recalled because his minor league rehab time, I believe, had fully elapsed. And so that was the rationale there for getting him back. Jesus Luzardo also expected to return this weekend. So the Marlins, they have a day off today, but with the Phillies coming into town, they're expected to have Braxton and Jesus Luzardo going for the first time together anyway in the same rotation this season. So, this is really encouraging to see Braxton Garrett back. Again, another underrated dude from last year. Feel like Brax and Ryan Weathers, they kind of fit in the same mold where they're not super flashy, not super sexy upside dudes, but they get outs. They get quality starts. They do it their way. For Brax, clearly right now, it's going to be about the health situation. And, he came into spring with an issue, worked his way back, had another issue, setback. And so for Brax right now, boy, oh boy, did you see that rehab start? I think in the complex league. Talk about a man against boys in that situation. I think he went just over 5 innings with like 14 Ks or something and 1 hit. So, Brax, clearly demonstrating that there's a gap in talent and ability from the big leagues and a guy that was, pitching in the postseason last year to the guys in the complex league and the young studs. For them, I think it's a really great learning experience actually to face someone like Braxton Garrett, someone that's really cute as well, because Brax is like a different type of dude, right? He isn't the high velo, power change dudes. He's more of an old school dude. So looking forward to getting Brax back. The interesting thing with Braxton Garrett, I just want to call it out, by the way. When I think about the Rays and the way they operate, I always think about when is a player at their peak value and is that the time they will be moved? And I do wonder with Brax whether he is at his peak value or actually was already at his peak value in the offseason. The question, clearly with pitchers, particularly having a career year, as they kind of move into their controllable years, in some ways their value starts to diminish slightly day on day because you get less control, etc. I think with Brax, I don't think that's probably the case just right now, and so his value probably holds. So the point I'm getting at here, the Marlins are selling, clearly. They're looking to rebuild and restock the farm. And the model, if we think about it, is move contracts that are close to expiry to maximize value there. Equally, do you sell guys more generally that are already at their peak? The question is from Peter Bendix's and the rest of the front office, and Mel Stottlemyre will feed into that, is have we already seen Braxton Garrett's peak? Was his best year last year? And if that is his peak, I think it's a really interesting conundrum there for the Marlins around, do they look to move Braxton Garrett this year? I feel like as a fan base, because we were never fully bought into Brax as a prospect, and he didn't have the sexy upside, we kind of forgot about him. And then when he came up in 2020, it was like, it looked okay, but we were never like, it felt like Braxton was on the cusp of like being DFA'd and being removed from the 40-man. And so from where he was then to where he's come now, great. But there's that history associated, that mental history with the fan base where I don't think we all fully believe in Brax. And I think if you maybe look at the numbers last year, there's probably a reason to think about that. He's a different type of pitcher. But there was, his ERA probably flattered him in some ways where like the defense was really, he was leaning heavily on the defense. And clearly the defense is not quite where it was. Definitely has improved, I guess, considering some of the recent, changes in personnel, etc. But, I think with Brax is a really interesting one. The main thing right now is let's get him back. Let's get him healthy. Let's get him performing. The rest will kind of work itself out. Let's hit the final ad. I want to talk about De La Cruz and leadoff Jazz. Before we do that, let's let you know about our good friends over at PrizePicks. And producer, get the graphics going. And PrizePicks are America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You pick more or less than on 2 or more player stats and watch those winnings roll in, baby. Baseball season is well underway, so don't miss your chance to strike. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your PrizePicks entries, whether it's strikeouts, see, I knew I had to say that, RBIs, or first inning runs. Take your pick of more or less than and add them to your PrizePicks entry today. And don't forget to get in on that playoff action as well and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. So what we got to do, we got to head over and download the app. The app is PrizePicks. And you got to use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. The reminder, download PrizePicks, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, guys, final segment here with me, Peter Pratt. A morning episode here because of a few delayed episodes. So apologies for that, but we're hitting it up early doors. The sun is shining here in the UK too. And the Marlins will not lose today. So that is also encouraging. But it's Thursday, the 9th of May. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen. I want to talk briefly about Jazz. De La Cruz, briefly touch on him. He's on fire again. On fire. Is De La Cruz at his peak right now? That's another question. But I'm not going to talk about De La Cruz. I'm going to skip over that segment and I cover him in more detail because he needs it. I just want to talk about leadoff Jazz Chisholm Jr. because since Arias traded, Jazz back up to the leadoff spot. And what I mean, I must say that Jazz, I think in general, once you've led off the game, it's all like there is no like leadoff situation again fully. But in terms of the way the lineup's constructed, the profile that Jazz Chisholm Jr. has, his profile is so well suited as a leadoff guy because of the speed aspect. He also has that power threat. And equally this year, the walks have improved as well. So for me, it's no surprise that Jazz has slotted back into that spot and all of a sudden has gone on a bit of a run. Few bombs, few extra bags. Like it feels like in that role, he kind of has been clicking, which is great to see. When I look at what he's actually produced, he's hitting, it's only 5 games, but he's hitting 278 in the leadoff spot, 3 stolen bags, a home run. Obviously, we saw that the other day. To be fair, in the cleanup spot where he spent most of his year, he's hitting 276 there anyway. So it's relatively marginal from that perspective. But I would say, from a stolen base perspective, what we are seeing with Jazz is the speed. That's the change, I would say, from the leadoff spot. More speed. Already 3 stolen bags from the leadoff spot, whereas spent a good amount of time, in the cleanup spot, only 2 stolen bags there. A couple of stolen bags as well from the 5th spot when he's been hitting against lefties. Just on that as well, by the way, I want to talk about, the lefty-righty split situation. So when he's a lefty on lefty this year, he's hitting 231. When he's hitting against righties, 239. So actually, in previous years with Jazz, we'd normally see it pretty an imbalanced situation where his production against righties was fine. Lefties was like, should he be hitting lefties ever again type of question. The Jesus Sanchez conversation we've had. I'd say with Jazz, we're distracted here at the moment with the Marlins because of everything that's going on with the front office and how terrible the record has been. And I think Jazz is he's in some ways a divisive player. I've mentioned it, I think, on the previous episode. Not everyone is fully bought into him. But what I would say from Jazz specifically this year, he's still healthy. He had a shoulder issue where he banged into the wall, but he seemingly worked his way through. Jazz is back healthy. It's always the first knock. So we haven't had any of that issue thus far. Fingers crossed. Clearly, we're only in the start of May. The other issue with Jazz is strikes out a ton, doesn't take any walks. He's improved the walks. No doubt. He's definitely improved the walks. The other knock then is can't hit lefties. Can't be an everyday player. I think that's changed. So what I'm seeing with Jazz is significant improvement in all of the areas where he'd be knocked. I know the health isn't really fully under his control, but some of it is. Like you talked about it, I'm going to improve my diet. I'm going to improve the way I go about things. So he's improving that equally, taking more walks and hitting better against lefties. Jazz is continuing to develop as a player. And I know probably Jazz, the profile, outweighs Jazz, the production in some ways, in many people's eyes. But with Jazz, he's still improving. The interesting part is where does he end this season? We're going to find that out in the next, couple of months with Jazz. But, you have to look around the league and think, where can he make an impact? He can make an impact probably anywhere. But frankly, the Dodgers, I think, and Jazz are an interesting fit. However, David Samson believes there's a 0% chance that will happen. That's a conversation for another day. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen, guys, and joining me, Peter Pratt, on Thursday, the 9th of May. Marlins swept in LA. It is what it is. Eddie Cabrera to the IL. The question I have with Eddie Cabrera is, when he returns, does he return as a starter or as a reliever? Braxton Garrett is back. The question with Brax is it the same Brax we saw in 23, or have we already seen his best? Jesus Luzardo also due to be back this weekend against the Phils. And leadoff Jazz seems to have unlocked the speed in particular. Jazz continues to develop and looks like a stud, in my opinion. Look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow.